Hello, I'm John. Welcome back. I got a book haul video for you today. These are not books that I bought all at once, but these are books that I've bought since my last book haul video, which was sometimes towards the end of November. So I picked up these books in various different places and different times. And yes, I'll get right to it. The first book is Selections from the Report of the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. It's got a drawing on the back there. And there was a lot of unrest in society in the late 60s, as you might imagine, between civil rights and, Vietnam and hippies and all that. You had the Weather Underground and groups like that. There was a lot of chaos in the late 60s. And this basically tried to lay out what was going on, why it was going on, and lay down some roots in the past and in society as it was. I'm not sure, when a bunch of government suits get together to explain civil disorder, they're usually, it's hard to explain, but they're looking at it from the most bewildered point of view, like they can't understand why this is happening. I don't know if this is what this is like. But this fits into my long-term project. I call it my 60s project, but really it's deeper than that. It's basically what led up to the 60s, all the chaos going on in the 60s, and from about 1945 onwards, really from about mid-1950s onwards, from maybe Eisenhower's second term up until 1980, basically. And so that fits in with that perfectly. And then we have MMK's Death in Berlin. This is a mystery novel. She wrote The Far Pavilions. I've never read a book by MMK. My dad read The Far Pavilions a few years ago, and he really, really liked it. And my dad does not really like to read fiction. So I was surprised that he liked that book so much. And he really hasn't liked too many novels, as far as I recall. He liked The Green Mile. He liked what's the novel by Charles Dickens? They made that Ethan Hawke movie. I never read that. Great Expectations, right. And he liked The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham, but he also liked The Far Pavilions. And that's my roundabout way of saying that I've been wanting to read MMK for a while, but I'm really more into mysteries and things like that than I would be into The Far Pavilions. So I have her, I want to say Death in Zanzibar and Death in Kenya, and now I have Death in Berlin, and I really need to get to reading those books. Next are two by Douglas Clegg, The Attraction. These are horror novels. Well, one's a horror novel, and one is a collection of short stories that may or may not be related. So this is basically what I gathered. Some college kids go out on a road trip, and they stop at a gas station, and there is what Thomas Ligotti referred to as a roadside carnival, right? It's not really a carnival, it's just kind of an attraction. See the artifacts we dug up in the yard or whatever. And apparently there's something supernatural going on here, and I don't think they make out very well. The next book is The Nightmare Chronicles. This is the collection of short stories. I've never read Clegg's short fiction. I read his novel, You Come When I Call You, and that's a pretty rough book. I'll probably talk about that at some point if I ever get back to my bookshelf tours. Next is The Damned by John D. McDonald. I've never read a John D. McDonald book before. I tend not to read very much crime, and hang on. This is why I'm distracted. See this? You're distracting me. Okay. But anyway, I don't read very much crime, and I wanted to give it a shot. I've heard a lot about John D. McDonald. Some people don't really like him. Some people like him a lot. And for $1 and a thin book, I thought I'd give it a try and just see if I liked him or not, or liked his books anyway. I don't know about him. Never met him. The next is Freddy's book by John Gardner. I'm a really big fan of Gardner's Grendel. I've never read his other books. I tried to read one of his... well, that's not true. I read his book on writing. I think I read 2 of his books on writing. And Gardner was kind of a snob in those books, and I really didn't care for the tone he took towards literature, towards writing, towards writers. So I haven't read very many of his other books, but I'd like to. I have a couple more of them, but I've heard about this one. A professor or a lecturer goes to a party, and like a 17-year-old kid or something, a young man, walks up and hands him a manuscript, and this book is basically that manuscript and the professor's comments on it. So that's, I don't know, it might be pretty interesting. The next is Mr. Midshipman Easy by Captain Marryat. This is from the early 1800s, I think. Yeah, 1836. And Captain Marryat was apparently a real captain in the Royal Navy. So this should be really interesting. It'll be interesting to have that first-hand perspective on the age of sail. That's pretty neat. Then we have Youth and the Bright Medusa by Willa Cather. This is stories. And I really like the cover of this book. I've seen this a couple of times, and I really like these vintage paperbacks. I always have. Some of them don't hold up very well. They get dry. I didn't realize when I bought this, the reason I've never bought this particular copy of the book is because they dry out and they crack and they break, and I didn't realize it, but this one is cracked. So I may be able to read that, I may not. I really like Cather's Oh Pioneers was really good. I read The Professor's House, which is really good, but it feels like 2 novels smashed together that don't really work with each other and don't have a lot to do with each other. I wanted so badly for that book to be really good, and it just kind of disappointed me. But that hasn't put me off reading Cather in the future. Next is another collection of horror short stories, Bed Bugs by Rick Hautala, I'm guessing. So this looks kind of interesting, Bed Bugs. I haven't been in the mood for horror fiction lately, but maybe I will soon. The next 2 are both by Georgette Hare, Why Shoot a Butler, and They Found Him Dead. That's a really good name for a mystery, I think. They Found Him Dead. That really sums it up, I think. Georgette Hare is on the way to becoming my favorite mystery novelist. I like her writing better than I like Agatha Christie's. It's hard to explain. She's really good at creating these characters that I don't really like, but I want to keep reading more and more of them, and that's not normal for me. Usually when I don't like a character, the book kind of grinds to a halt. That's not how it is with her novels. And I've even considered maybe reading some of her romance novels, which is a sentence I never thought that I would say, because romance is not really my kind of thing. Like, I don't look down on it or anything, but in fact, I often go to, at the local bookstore I go to, one of them, the romance novels are right behind the fiction paperbacks, and every time I see somebody looking at romance novels, I want to go, good for you, I'm glad you're reading what you like, but I don't, because that would be weird. But anyway, my point is, I just like her writing a lot, and I'd like to read more of her books, so when I see them, I buy them. The next one is more short stories. These are weird short stories by Robert Aickman. This is Compulsory Games. And I really, really wasn't expecting to see this. I've never seen this in person. I've wanted it for quite some time. This came out in 2018 or something like that. I'm not sure if it's a reprint of an earlier collection. I know there are a couple of those in the NYRB series. She's over here whining. But, yeah, so I really like Aickman. I like his, the Hospice, the collection Cold Hand in Mind. I've read another one that I don't have anymore. And the next book is Franklin and Winston, An Intimate Portrait of an Epic Friendship by John Meacham. And I really, really like this cover. It's gold and black. I don't know why. The picture really, it all just really goes very well together. The way whoever designed this cover did a really good job. These are all raised. It's just really nice. And this is, you know, a friendship I'm pretty interested in. I just finished Churchill's The Gathering Storm. I've read a lot about Churchill, and I really do like to read about him. On the other hand, I am not really a big fan of Franklin Roosevelt. And that's not because of his politics really so much as, you know, there was a lot that was likable about Churchill. And as far as I can tell, what little I know, Roosevelt kind of strikes me as the narcissistic, cold-blooded politician who used people to get what he wanted and then ditched them. I may be totally wrong about that. I haven't really read a lot about Roosevelt, and that's one person I'd like to read more about. So I thought maybe this would be a good entry point into Franklin Roosevelt. Or not an entry point, really. I've read about him quite a bit over the years, because I've read a lot of Second World War fiction, and I've read quite a few histories of the 30s, but I haven't really read anything specifically about Franklin Roosevelt. The next is the edition I had been looking for, and the one that I wanted, which is the Norton Critical Edition of Paradise Lost by John Milton. This one is from 1975. It's edited by Scott Elledge, and it's just really nice, you know, and for being 50 years old, this book is in excellent shape. And so now I don't really have an excuse not to read Paradise Lost, because, you know, it's got the annotations and everything, and there are essays on the back from the past, 500 years, 400 years, so that's pretty cool. Next is a big book that has been on the shelves, the clearance shelves of a bookstore I go to for quite some time, and I look at it and I think, that's really interesting, but so it was $3. All these books were pretty cheap. I think this $3 one is probably the most expensive one of the lot, really. Most of them were about $1.60, because I got a few of them at Goodwill, and that's all the books at Goodwill are $1.60 around here, except for the really nice ones. They charge more for those now. But anyway, it is Dharma Lion, an autobiography of Allen Ginsberg. Oh, excuse me, a biography of Allen Ginsberg. I find Ginsberg to be a really interesting figure of the 60s, 50s, 60s, and you know, he was really in the middle of these literary movements that were going on in the counterculture. I read Howl years ago, and I didn't really care for it, but I'm not a huge fan of poetry. It just bounces right off me. I've said this numerous times because it's the truth, and it's kind of why I'm afraid of Paradise Lost. It's I'm a fast reader, and so nuances are sometimes lost on me. But I think that Ginsberg is a really interesting figure in that period of time. He was friends with Kerouac, William Burroughs, Ken Kesey, I believe. Kerouac's friend's name, the one he went on the trip with that was in On the Road, which is another book I haven't read, need to get to. Anyway, I just, yeah, that's going to be really interesting. Like I said, that's kind of part of my 60s project, reading about the figures of the 60s. and the people who influenced the 60s and the people who influenced the 70s. So the next one I absolutely wasn't expecting to see, and I'm really glad that I did. I almost didn't look at it. It's This I Remember by Eleanor Roosevelt. And I've been interested in Eleanor Roosevelt for a lot longer than I've been interested in Franklin Roosevelt. She seemed like a really good person, a really genuine person, and someone who used her position for, to do good things. And I like that. And I've been wanting to read about her for quite some time. That's in one of my recent tags. I said that I felt guilty for not reading a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt, and now I have her life in her own words, and I think I'd probably rather read this first than read the biography of her. Of course, this only goes up to 1949, and the biography goes up until the end of her life. So, yeah, in fact, I might start this one next. I'm not 100% on that. I never really like to commit myself to... She's excited because she doesn't really get to come back here, have a gate over the door, and she likes to pee on the rug. There's a big coffee table in the middle of this room, and I can't see on the other side of it, and she likes to go over there and pee on the rug, so she doesn't really get to come in here very often, and she's just kind of excited, and I think she's had her fill, actually, and wants out. But, yeah, anyway, so... This I Remember by Eleanor Roosevelt. This is a first edition, I believe, from 1949. There she is again, a picture. I don't think there are any more pictures. I could be wrong. But anyway, yeah, so that's pretty cool. I was, like I said, I was really surprised to find that and really happy that I did for $1.60. And the last book is Veil, The Secret Wars of the CIA, 1981 to 1987, by Bob Woodward, who he wrote he uncovered the Watergate scandal with, was it Carl Bernstein? I read that book quite a while back, a couple of years ago, All the President's Men, and there is Ron Reagan and William Casey from the CIA. And so I like the way that Bob Woodward writes. I have one more of his books, but I haven't read it yet. It's about George Bush and Iraq. Yeah, so my trouble is that I read Dutch by Edmund Morris a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, and Morris took some really, really weird liberties with that book, and he painted a rather unflattering picture of Ronald Reagan as a person, and he kind of wrote about him like he was an empty-headed automaton that they kept in a closet and brought out for events and then put away again. It's really hard to explain the tone that Morris took towards Reagan in that book. And it was the Reagans actually, I believe, hired Morris to do that book, and they were not happy, as far as I know. But anyway, I asked Steve Donahue. I sent him an email about a week ago, and I asked him if there were any books that could kind of humanize Ronald Reagan and make me see him as a real person again. And he suggested that I read Max Boot's biography of Reagan that came out, I think last year or the year before, I'm not certain. I haven't seen that one, but I'm sure I'll find it someplace for $1, and maybe I'll be able to take Reagan seriously again. Or maybe this book could do it. I really don't know. Woodward's really good at, anyway, I'm tongue-tied, so I'm just going to leave it there. But that is Veil by Bob Woodward, and that is my book haul, and I want to thank you for watching. I'm going to get up and let her out, and I'll see you next time.